Or should be live. We're live. Hi, Lauren, Tech Bros, episode 5. How you doing?
Is it 5 or is it 6?
6.
I
5,
think we're on
6, you know.
6.
Numbers, what
Where does
matters,
the time
time,
go?
space. Episode 6. You are absolutely
Yeah,
right.
time, space. We're all just floating on this green and blue marble. Could be episode 20 for all we know. AI is going to take over in 10 years. So,
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. So after the shows, I go back and watch them, which is not narcissism. It's just the reflex of somebody who worked in TV for 15 years. Like go back and see, what we did, what we could do better, whatever. So I was watching last week's show back and I was like, it was a hard show for me. I think like the topic was, on the surface, we were talking intersection of tech and porn, but like ultimately, as we got into discussion, it was really talking about exploitation of, vulnerable people. And throughout the show, I was like, wow, I could see that it was really bothering me because, tech bros have
Sure.
feelings, believe it or not. We are humans, we are not bots, and talking about tough topics can be hard on the spirit. That said, we do have a quick little discussion about porn once again. You sent me a headline about porn, something that happened this week.
No, yeah, this is great. This is one of as the entire economy and world collapses, only slightly exaggerating, the Federal Reserve is doing, I think it was yesterday, they were doing a meeting and one of the Federal Reserve governors was going up to speak and, some character on the Zoom call, like was porn bombing it, which is funny because they were talking about, they wanted to read on the jobs and inflation numbers. And obviously that's going to inform whether, how rates get hiked potentially in the future. And, the goofballs at the Fed are not immune to the same things that we have as mere mortals when we host Zoom calls and do things like that. And goofballs like to go on there and porn bomb things. So that was pretty funny.
But it wasn't somebody who.
Theorist. I'm a conspiracy theorist. I think it was on purpose so that the person didn't have to give a speech because they canceled the whole thing after that. And they released like the text later. And, it gave all the numbers and everything. So that was pretty interesting.
You don't think it was an accidental screen share where...
I don't think anything's ever an accident. That's just, my own tinfoil hat way of living.
Yeah, that's, and one we embrace here on the Tech Bros show. Nothing is an accident, especially when it comes to the Federal Reserve and, serious shit like that. Let's talk about a post that was on Hacker News this week, or a discussion, we should say. There was a great blog that was posted. We can't figure out who wrote it. We're assuming that it was an anonymous author. This is the blog. Most data work seems fundamentally worthless. And, great post that got a fantastic discussion going on Hacker News. His title is his or her, we don't know who the person is. Sorry, tech bro error there. His or her article is basically about how meaningless both data and in general tech jobs are. I heard, Lauren, that some people thought that you were the author behind this.
Yeah, I got several emails. So this was on the front page of Hacker News this week. And when we talk with our guests in a few minutes, we'll go over this. Several people had emailed me or messaged me this week and they were like, Lauren, did you make a fake blog or an anonymous blog and post this? And I was like, no, this wasn't me. This is somebody else out there. Because these are the types of things that I fundamentally believe or, somewhat believe. It's really interesting. A lot of people are like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing all this machine learning? Why are we doing all this analytics? Why are we spending so much on it? Interesting blog post, and we'll get into some of the reasons why this person, might think the way they do, and everything like that later in the episode.
Absolutely, and I'm going to highlight this one quote from it because really it's a discussion about how absurd and seemingly meaningless a lot of these jobs are, other than for making a lot of money for the people doing them. But I love this quote. It's getting at sort of ridiculousness of saying that most companies are data-driven. It's what I hadn't really grasped was the degree to which some organizations have grown so absurdly fat that they could afford to dispose of millions of dollars on employees who did nothing other than reaffirm a vague commitment to being data-driven. I think we need to take some of that wording and work it into our overall, slogans about data and tech. Like we will bring you a vague commitment to being data-driven, because that's a lot of what's out there.
We are not data-driven, you and I, in running this podcast. We're only on episode 6. We're not data-driven yet.
No, someday we will be. Once we get the right products and hire the right people, pay them a lot of money. We skipped Tech Bro of the Week. Let's do that at the end, Lauren, and let's just go ahead and bring the guests on, because we're kind of into already what they're going to talk about. So, bringing in Santona Tuli and Mikiko Bazeley. Correct me if I said the names wrong. Hi, why don't you both introduce yourselves? Happy to have you here.
Hi, super happy to be here. I'm Santona. I've known Mary for a couple of years now. I was on your, I think, very first podcast / live session.
We go way back. We are legit.
And right now, I'm a data scientist by training from particle physics. Did some machine learning. Right now, I'm working at the intersection of data and product in the data tooling space. So I work for a company called Upsolver. We do streaming and batch data pipelines. Super excited to talk about jobs and data, and some of the bullshit that's here and some of the less bullshit stuff as well.
Love it. And you when we first spoke, I think you were recently out of your PhD, so you've been in industry for about 2 years now. So at Upsolver now, and previously at Astronomer, is that right?
Yeah, and then before that at Directly. Yeah, I finished my PhD in 2019.
Awesome, great stuff. And then let's hear from you, Mikiko.
Hey everyone, hope you can hear me. My name is Mickey. I'm head of MLOps at Featureform, which is a virtual feature store. We essentially are focused on developing the best dev tools for data scientists, while making sure they do all the right things to not drive their platform engineers insane in the MLOps space. So helping data scientists do the right thing, but as painlessly as possible.
And is Featureform a place you started recently? Didn't you switch companies? Because I've been stalking you for a while.
Yep. So I started with Featureform last October, I want to say. Prior to that, I was on the ML platform team at MailChimp. And honestly, I've just done a hodgepodge of data jobs, from kind of low data as a growth operations business side folk, to a data analyst, to data scientist, to an MLOps engineer. So I just, I embody the 10 years, the 10 times 1 years of experience, as opposed to, 10 years of experience in a single career path.
Love it.
That's more valuable, in my opinion. You get to see what works and what doesn't work in 10 different places, rather than just pushing paper at one place.
Yeah, the only challenge is honestly keeping up with the medical insurance. I've just never been able to line it up. So I had Kaiser twice in a row, or Blue Shield twice in a row. It's no, just every single time. It's oh, great. Now I got to get a different GP. This is great.
It's insane. We need assistance, not to sound elitist or anything, but all of us could use assistance just to track the goddamn health insurance stuff and switching providers and specialists and all that. It's part of the insanity, particular to U.S. capitalism, late stage capitalism. Let's start with that kind of premise of the Hacker News discussion. Is most data work fundamentally useless? Coming from, again, I'm here talking to 3 mega data brains with all varieties of experience.
I could go on and on, so I'll let the guests talk.
Give the guests the floor. Yeah.
Yeah. What is worthless? What isn't worthless? If you're doing worthwhile things, how do you prevent yourself from becoming worthless? Just to use the Hacker News person's terminology. What do you think about all this?
Yeah, I think at the core of it is that we take ourselves a little too seriously.
No.
No way. What? That's crazy.
Yeah, specifically in tech, and then even more specifically in data. Yeah, all of this obsession with data-driven, data is the new oil, XYZ is the sexiest job of the 21st century. It's just a lot of noise, a lot of buzzwords being coined semi-regularly, and then applications were like applying data where it's not needed. I think that's sort of at the root of a lot of data work is. I mean, this obviously is facetious, right? It's not it's not entirely a true statement. But like my partner says, he sells pants. He's a data science manager at a fashion company. He's like, I sell pants. That's what I do. So I really like that sort of, yeah, that's a reality. If you can draw a line between what you do and the impact that it has on other people, then that's a lineage that you can point to and say, hey, this is my impact. It's not to not to belittle anyone's job, or I work in tooling, right? So like that, my line from my impact to impact on end user is very hard to see. And Mickey as well, we're both in tooling, but what we can do is see the impact on folks that are using our tools, and how it's benefiting them in their workflows, and that's impactful to me.
Sure.
I mean, part of it too is also defining like what value is, because for the person whose palms are being greased, for having a high salary to basically just push bullshit in a company, I'm sure like work is very useful for them. It's very valuable. It helps pay their, like $1 to $2 million mortgage out in, I don't know, like Mountain View or Palo Alto or whatever, right? So, I would think we have to define what value and usage is. And it's also the whole like that Warren Buffett, show me the like incentives or whatever, and I'll show you what people are doing. And I think that's part of it, because, and this is something that like an exercise I've been going through with, not just some of our like users, but also just in prior companies where we're talking about, okay, so like MLOps, right? Like what was very similar to DevOps, there is this question of like, so what is the value of having like a bunch of MLOps tooling, right? How do we measure the actual impact on data scientists? And a lot of people like to default to like, DORA or SRE metrics, but that's really actually hard to do with a data science project. And it's almost like you kind of have to separate the level of concerns. There is the concern for the individual data scientist on how well their project does. And then there's the concern of the teams that service them. And there's the concern of the organization and business. Like that's a very nice way to say that there should be value in data science. Like there should be value in data science. There should be value in machine learning. There should be value in data work. But it also comes down to like people having the courage to be wrong. And I feel like there is a lot of that lack of humility and courage, and the ability to say, like, for example, if you're on the business side and analysis comes up that like, hey, you're screwing up your sales team, you're screwing up your marketing initiative, you don't just push back on it and go like, oh yeah, the data analysts, like they clearly wrote like the wrong query. Like they didn't include the right assumptions. Oh, they didn't include that, we just hired a bunch of like newbies into the sales role and they're kind of rough and getting started. But instead it's like, okay, I acknowledge that this is not where we're at. And, let's take a look at kind of like what is driving that. But it does feel like if you're not willing to change your behavior off of data and whatever insights you get, then it's like, don't even pretend that you're data driven, because you're not. You're like incentive driven.
Sure. This all, makes total sense to me. Going back to what the Hacker News thing said, are most like data jobs like worthless or whatever? I think there are just too many people that are doing this. I think that like organizations will, and it's like classic empire building is what happens. And, you can talk about zero interest rate policies and, a lot of these companies that invest in all this data stuff have too many like employees in general. When you have more employees want more analysis and they want more dashboards and they want more everything. All right, well, let's hire more data employees. And so it's like a self-feeding machine And I know tons of companies that have, or they had like 20-person data teams. They had like 3 machine learning people, and then an MLOps person, and a couple of data scientists. The data scientists don't know how to productionize anything, so that's why they had to hire the MLOps person. And they have ML people, and then they have analysts and analytics engineers, but they all work on Snowflake, and that's kind of separate from what the ML people do. And there's an initiative. Oh, well, let's put everything in Snowflake, and it's just this one gigantic like circle of silliness that can happen. And I also like I've written about this before. Like, I wrote a thing that's making the circles. Snowflake is a table game. Google Cloud is a casino. Because like at the end of the day, like a lot of these companies, especially ones that are venture backed, they're playing this Google game and they're trying to use Google search, SEO. They're using Google products to like build, a Firebase app. They're buying Google ads. Well, they want to optimize all that. And if they want to optimize all that, what do? Well, they start making analytics. They start making machine learning stuff. All their tools are Google. And so all their stuff plugs into Google Cloud Platform, BigQuery, Spanner, Bigtable, everything else that Google offers. So now you're just using Google Compute and hiring more people to optimize all your Google apps. And if you don't see that as a casino, then I'll take you to Vegas and show you what a casino is. It's like all right, let's spend a little less on the blackjack table. Let's go over to craps. And it's really funny, I think, and I think it's actually kind of dangerous for like people, especially younger people who like work in this industry, if they're not thinking about like the platforms they're working on and how they're monetized and incentivized. I'm not to say that Google is evil. Google says don't be evil, right? So they can't be evil. But Snowflake, Google, any database management system you use, any of the evil vendors out there like Upsolver or Featureform, I think the last couple of years, a lot of data employees have been a little bit spoiled about like knowing, like a lot of them don't like I talk to analysts and analytics engineers and people like that. They have no idea how much the queries they write cost. Like either at that, like if it's an ad hoc thing, like running it once, or if it like, feeds into like this continuous ML model or BI tool or whatever, they don't know because they don't have the access to it. And I think that like, are most jobs worthless? Some are. I think there's too many people. And I think that like everybody needs to be more accountable to like how much all this stuff kind of like costs and what the ROI is. So I could rant for an hour here, but I'll stay quiet.
I think the most ridiculous thing I ever saw on LinkedIn was someone going, well, why doesn't everyone just use SageMaker? Because you basically get all the MLOps tooling for free. And I'm like, have you seen how much that shit costs? Like,
right.
So
right.
Some company, yeah. And so this is one of those things where it's, so there are some companies who like, they were just solving really hard, tricky, like, for example, like Google, Facebook, Twitter, Uber, all these companies, they were solving like truly hard, special challenges when no one else was. And so they developed in-house frameworks and they developed like certain like methodologies and paradigms. But so something that I thought was really interesting, there's a blog post saying that on LinkedIn, it was going around where it's like, startups, people who are laid off don't want to work at your company. And this idea that of the folks who have been laid off, the ones who have enough severance or can make it work, they're instead going to go actually try to like build their own thing. Because one, they're disillusioned with like their job security at big companies. Number two, they have enough of a severance package where they can kind of think a little bit for the ones who are lucky. And I talked to 2 folks just last week who have said, hey, Mick, we see that you're doing this content thing. Can you kind of help us, get like off the ground? And they're also like, for example, one's like a principal data science engineer a principal data scientist or whatever, who has like tons of patents like under their belt. And they're like, the companies just don't want to hire us because we're so senior at like 45. and they're like, they don't want to hire us for like the salary that, we're asking for. So we might as well just go build our own thing. So I think that's going to be really interesting. I think there's going to be like, we see in the next 6 months, there's going to be a lot of folks like just coming out of the woodwork with like new startups, new businesses, which I think is just in general fantastic from a competitive standpoint. But it's really uneven if you look at it, right? So some folks I know who've been laid off, they're still getting hit up by recruiters left and right. And there's others where, and not just because of a visa situation, but for a lot of them, they were okay with like resting investing. And now I think they're really kind of struggling to point to like, what was the like impact of like what they did. So it's interesting. The layoffs aren't impacting people like, equally. And I think this comes down to like the value of data work. And Shanton, I think like you and I, we've talked about this before. I know you have a lot of thoughts about this, but people are also really bad at like, first off, doing the right things when it comes to data projects, like zeroing in on like what is actually valuable. And then they also don't like advocate for themselves. Right. And I think that really impacts like not just their resume, but also how they perceive the value of data work as well.
Yeah. What you said reminded me, like COVID wasn't the great equalizer, right? Neither were the tech layoffs. Everyone's journeys are different, and they're going to be affected by these factors differently. But yeah, I mean, couldn't agree more. Like being able to point to, the projects that you worked on, and specifically like what you did for those projects is huge in being able to advocate for yourself for the next thing. And if you're sort of kind of coasting, it doesn't really work that well.
How many data employees are coasting in the market?
I don't know. And like,
that's what I think about this constantly. And like, I have a very bearish opinion on this because like with my firm, like the last 2 years, we're brought in to clean stuff up when it didn't go right. And if things are going okay or management thinks it's okay, I wouldn't get called. And so I get called in and I'm like, everything's a mess. All the outputs are wrong. You've hired how many people to do this? And if I'm just looking at like PRs and people, like how much like work has been done, like there are people who like will put out like one PR, like one small PR every 3 weeks or something. And I'm like, well, this is a big team. Like, who's actually doing work here? And so I've seen the coasting happen. And like, I don't know what, I mean, in some cases, it's just like, a bad head of data or head of ML or head of whatever. In some cases, I don't know. Like, I think that's also a kind of, it can be a function of some of this stuff. Like who's coasting and who isn't.
Yeah, I think that this is another place where it's really hard to be data-driven, actually, right? Because the metrics aren't as clear, right? Like, I would argue that PRs are not a great metric to see, to track productivity or contribution. Like, as you get more senior, or maybe, for whatever reason, you're having less time to do IC work, you're producing less PRs, or maybe you're doing exploratory data analysis, and that those don't always end up in PRs against production pipelines. So yeah, and it's kind of hard to measure impact, especially from the outside, for sure.
I would argue that I don't want to contradict what you're seeing, Lauren, which I'm sure is the truth, but the data persona, like, we all know a lot of data people. They're not people who tend to want to coast. They're the people who want to do things, and maybe what you're seeing is more a function of the organizational culture in these companies and a lot of mistakes that were made in terms of what was built in the aspirations.
I think frustration, I know it's for Lauren, but I'm just going to say, I think frustration can be a huge path to like being less productive or impactful in the business. And yeah, that for me is absolutely like tech debt is part of it, but also just like mismanagement and like annoying processes that are just like halt you at every step.
Yeah, sort of how I would, building off of that, say is the grifters aren't necessarily the tech people, especially the ones who do the actual work. The grifters are somewhere else. in the orgs.
It's really hard to rise above like poor leadership and poor organizational culture.
Oh,
like,
sure.
100%. And I mean, this, like, I should have listened to this advice, but I didn't really understand what the person was talking about when they said don't accept a job based off like how much you like the team who's hiring you. If there are red flags, do not do it, because if there are enough red flags, there's enough organizational inertia that all the really cool, awesome people are going to leave. And this has happened to me 2 or 3 times where I joined a team. There were some solid people and they left within 3 months, and I'm there for a year, because at that point my family was just coming down on me hard. They're like, you cannot be switching jobs every single year. I'm like, Ma, please stop. Also, this is the Silicon Valley. I can do whatever I want, damn it.
Right. You can switch jobs every 2 months, right?
Yeah, but like it yeah, I mean, it's just it's very hard. And I saw some teams where, oh, man, like have you guys heard of the Peter principle? This idea that everyone everyone rises to the level of their incompetence. First off, I thought that book was glorious, especially in the era where all books are like yay big. Instead, he got it in this little pamphlet that was yay big, which is great. But I just saw that nepotism, and it was crushing, because I just saw, we talk about like the STEM pipeline, about how there aren't enough women in like, data engineering and data science. And I saw this group of capable women just being crushed by absolute mediocrity.
Mm-hmm.
And including like just in some sessions, like getting, for example, like this one chick, she'd worked on a dashboard, which was a last minute ask anyway. And then our manager took it over and redid it badly. And he forced her to present in front of like a bunch of key stakeholders. Of course, she bounced to, she bounced to one of the big tech companies, which is awesome.
Because he was an asshole to her. Yeah.
Because he was an asshole, but he was an asshole that was being, he was like the right hand of a higher level, exec. And so he would follow this exec, right? And it was just it was garbage. And I was being like, everyone eventually on my team left until I was like almost the only one. So I started being surrounded by a bunch of like really like awesome, strong women. And they either left or they were getting burned down enough that they were about to leave. And then there was just like the constant gaslighting. I'm like, how was this person allowed to like stay around? Like, why was this person allowed to just like run a team into the ground? But you see that often enough that it's like, maybe this is like a feature. It's not a bug in some companies.
This is the reason I started my own firm. I just went out and flipped everybody off at a company, and I was like, fuck you, you're an idiot. Fuck you, you're an idiot. I'm starting my own thing. Eric Hartman, screw you fuckers. I'm going home. And started my own company, and then 4x what I take home a year, because I was done with putting up with the nonsense.
You can be the asshole, yeah.
yeah. You want to be an asshole? Fuck you. And then a year later, I sent my tax. This is very spiteful. I went on, I got their emails, because I had their emails because I worked with them, and I sent them my tax form a year later of how much I made. I made $1 million, and sent it to him. Screw you! You wasted my time. I'm out of here.
Love it.
Love
it. I want to say hi to some viewers, but Santona, did you want to chime in first on any of this?
Oh, I was just nodding really hard when Mickey was telling this story. It's so much politics. It's so much, at the mid and upper management level, it is who you know and who trusts you, and
yeah, absolutely, politics. Let's say hello to Chris Tab. He's got a data conference coming up. Sounds a little bit elitist, Chris Tab's conference, because it involves skiing. But look it up. It'll probably be cool.
He's in Europe.
Skiing in Europe, where it's much more affordable. It's less elitist over there. You just have to pay to get over there. So, hey, Chris, regular viewer. Josh Gallant. We haven't seen you in a while, Josh. So we're happy to have you back.
Did you see? Yeah. Hey, what's up, Josh? Everybody. Did you see the So Matt Turk put out the thing last year. He called he put it out last week. He called the modern data stack and other parts of the data stack elitist. And I know Matt a little bit. I've met him before. He lives here in New York. I see him around. Nice guy. He called it elitist. And I was reading something that like DBT puts out a weekly thing every Sunday or whatever. Where they're like, I don't think this is elitist. In the back of my head, I'm like, I don't know. Like most of this stuff these data jobs seem pretty elitist. Like, pretty cushy jobs, making $200K a year to shuttle data around from point A to point B. I don't know. Since the point came up here, I think it is. I think the whole thing's elitist.
Well, I mean, you and I have talked about you and I, Lauren. I don't know about Santona and Mikiko. Like we've held real jobs. Like I had a stint recently when I was between jobs where I sold cars. Like you've worked in kitchens, So when you've done that, you have a real appreciation for the big paychecks that come in. Let me just keep going to say hello to all the guests so nobody feels left out. We respect people's feelings here on the Tech Bro Show. Ryan Dolly, we will be on his show soon, the first time we appear as a pair on another show. Although I'm thinking we should maybe invite Mickey and Shantana to come with us because I like this foursome. I think it's pretty awesome. So maybe they'll crash the show too. Hello, as always, to Joe Reese, Kelly Hopkins, regular viewers. Hope you're doing great, both of you. And did I miss anybody? Oh, Val Goldine. I think that's one of your buddies, Lauren. And Dipankar Mazumdar, who's in Devrel. I see him a lot on Twitter. I think that's everybody. So, Abhi, first time viewer. I know he watches, but first time I've seen him chime in.
We got to figure this out. This is our data analytics project. We got to figure out why some people show up as LinkedIn user or YouTube user, and other ones show up as their name. I don't know.
Yeah, but, we need an intern, and we need an unpaid intern because I'm not giving up any of the money that I make. You're not either.
Yeah, out of the $0 we make on this, we can get an intern. Well, so I also another trend that's been coming up, and this is kind of goofy, but it's calling things dead, and this is really silly, and I want to bring it up, and it's going to lead into me asking Santona a question, but I want to hear it. And so one thing that's happened in the data world and tech world in general is vendors, whoever, someone goes and makes a post, that's dead. Blank is dead. And so Mother Duck did it recently. Mother Duck, they go, big data is dead. And Ethan Aaron, who was on our show a few weeks ago, runs the ETL company, he put out a post this week where he's just like, everything's dead. And it was a joke because, he's like, why is everything dead? Because it makes good content. And then if you look like ThoughtSpot, their BI tool, the dashboard is dead. Everything's dead. That other thing's dead. Earlier this week, I was putting out.
Oh, right.
I was putting out a little silly thing about this show. I was like,
it was your tweet. It was your tweet in which you said the best line ever, which is we're gonna have four tech hoes, tech bro out.
Yeah. So I asked if Debezium is dead. I know Upsolver uses Debezium, and I just asked an innocent question. I'm a little, angel over here. Is Debezium CDC dead? And then a bunch of people started retweeting it or sharing it. And then all the Debezium people started doing live PRs and live requests from customers live on Twitter because I accidentally called something dead. And so I'm just I'll ask you, Shan, is Debezium dead or not dead or undead? How are you using it at Upsolver? And also what do you think is dead versus not dead, since everyone's just calling everything dead nowadays in the data analytics ML world?
Yeah, the second question is a lot more interesting, so I'll spend most of the time there. But yeah, we use the Debezium engine to power our CDC capability. I mean, CDC is extremely important, right? You don't want to do your analytics in your application database. You need to be able to replicate the data in your analytics data warehouse or data lake or whatever, and work with it. So you need change data capture. From what I understand, Debezium is kind of the leading one right now in that space. But yeah, The calling things dead point is a lot more interesting. And yeah, I've it's one of the more frustrating things for sure as far as in content goes. And you're absolutely right. Like the reason people are saying these things is because it pays off to be controversial, I guess, and just like say something and spark the conversation. And it is, as a consumer of content, it is so frustrating to me because I know it is so see-through. Like I know exactly what you're doing. I know exactly why you're saying this, and you just want to. And like the posts comparing Snowflake and Databricks and like all of these like turf wars and stuff. It's frustrating to me. A lot of when people try to say something is dead is because they're trying to sell something else.
Right.
So two things. One is like I just want to get more people to engage with my post, and the other is I want to sell this other thing that competes with it. So the other thing's dead. There is something to be said about big data being dead. It's not dead, but I do also want to emphasize the point that like not everyone has big data. Some people have medium-sized data. Some
people have never had big data. A lot of companies never had it. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Never will, yeah.
So it's like maybe not. Don't put it like that. That big data is dead. Maybe there's a better way of saying, "Hey, look, this is a reasonable scale thing, and this is what our tool's for." So yeah.
Mickey, what are you killing? Like, what's dead? In your world?
Killing everything.
What is dead? Everything's
SageMaker. SageMaker's dead.
Yeah, so I think nuance doesn't exactly sell, right? Nuance and salty is not really a thing anymore. Yeah, so I think so it's what's interesting, right, is because part of the Mother Duck team actually worked at BigQuery, right? And that was talked about in the blog post, right? Was that part of the job was kind of convincing people like, hey, you do kind of need BigQuery. And what was interesting was that Andrew Ng had talked about in a webinar, he had said that way back, not quite in the big data era, yeah, kind of in the big data era, actually. There was a company in the big tech that he was working with that was a cloud provider. So, that narrows it down to like really two people at that, or two orgs, two companies at that time, Google and Amazon. And they said, hey, we need to sell the idea that you can only do machine learning if you have big data, because then we can convince people to buy our tools. So yeah, I mean, there's a challenging thing, right? Because on the one hand, as a company, as an endeavor, like, yeah, you should be selling a service and you should be making money. If you're not, then you're a nonprofit or you're like a government organization. But on the other hand, are you selling something that that is bad for your customers? I think that's shit, right? That's not really great ethics. And so for companies like Featureform, like, we're like an open source, open core company. There's a risk in that move, because on the one hand, it's like if someone doesn't like something, they can very clearly see it. And also like our competitors can look at us and go like, oh, we're going to copy that. Right. So there is a risk there, but at the same time, we're kind of like, it's worth it, because especially if we're a dev tool company for data scientists, we need to be understanding what the friction points are in the usability. And you get that best by having people like download it and use it, right? But like to a certain degree, being customer centric is risky in ways, because your customers could say, hey, we don't like the product and we don't want to buy it. On the other hand, I don't think we need more companies selling stuff that people don't need or is like shit, right? So I think there needs to be a little bit of that courage and bravery.
How do you define what's shit? Because any vendor's going to say, no, we're good. We're going to help you do blah, blah, blah. So where's the line drawn?
Yeah, 100%. So actually, I started reading this book called Kill It With Fire by Marianne Bellotti. It's basically, it's called like managing manage aging computer systems and future-proof modern ones. Basically, she talks about how to actually do like legacy upgrades, how to like upgrade legacy systems well, and in a way that's just not like, buy it and shift it. And I think part of it is like, so okay, we had the modern data stack, right? This idea that there's this like pattern that will account for 80% of businesses, because we just assume 80% of businesses, they are like not at the outlier of Google, Facebook, Apple scale. There's going to be like everything below that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an interesting idea. It's also 10 years, like lots of people talk about why the modern data stack no longer works, right? A lot of folks are trying to do that in the MLOps space, and we just don't think that's going to happen. Like, there might be a few dominant patterns, maybe there might be a few patterns that people centralize around, but we think that's just really not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So part of it is, number one, like, companies saying, hey, we acknowledge that there's not going to be a singular solution, and we're also not going to be the best for everyone. So there are cases where some of our competitors might be a better fit, especially in very specialized use cases. But for 80% of folks, they could probably use something lighter. And for a good chunk of those, they might not be a good fit for the paid solution, right? So I don't know. I think it takes a little bit of that like courage and willingness to like back a certain play, even knowing that it might not be profitable to you in the long run, right? So something that would be very bad would be like if we said, hey, like, we think our solution is amazing for everyone, regardless of how much data, like how much, data you're shifting, depending on, it doesn't matter your throughput, latency, or cost when it comes to serving predictions. Like if we said that would be like really inauthentic, and that would be kind of a lie. But we think we would be a very good or reasonable solution for a majority of companies, because we think a majority of companies are not, or teams or organizations, because the majority of them are not Google scale, right? So I think it is willing to basically say like, hey guys, there are some folks that we are not going to work well. It's like dating. I'm like, I can already tell, when I was out on the dating world on OkCupid and Tinder or Plenty of Fish or whatever, what was the other, Hinge? I don't know.
Bumble.
Bumble, you're right.
I missed the whole thing. I missed the whole thing.
Yeah. I could already tell, right? Like just swiping, I'm like, okay, so if they've got a picture of themselves boating and doing the Napa Valley wine tour, and they have a bunch of like acronyms of different cities they visited, and also if they have like, swipe left, I'm like, ooh, this is already going to be a very bad match. Very, very not a good fit.
So you didn't use an ML algorithm for that?
You know what? I had a spreadsheet actually. Like, so there's that lady who did that, the talk about, because she was like a marketing analyst or a marketing professional, about how she did A/B testing on her profiles on OkCupid. So I read that book back early on. I was like very inspired. I'm like, I'm going to do this too. But actually, there's a few heuristics that kind of worked out very well, and like one of them was
I do that all the time.
Photo,
but I put MILF on mine, and I think everybody in the LA County greater metropolitan area swiped right.
Oh my god, that's amazing!
Just by putting MILF on there, you get everybody.
I think like there must be a bot that automatically makes everybody swipe right. And
then
are
you getting
a bunch of creeps. I mean that's a whole other show into itself, honestly.
That's a good, Mary. You gotta put that on a spreadsheet and then do some analysis on it. That's like 1 million view blog post right there.
True, yeah. That's
how I got so many matches by putting MILF on my profile.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's not false advertising, like
Honestly,
so
all the folks.
I cut you off, Mickey.
No worries, but I will say all the folks, like I made the mistake of treating my like dating profiles very seriously. So I'd put details that I thought was really important, like the kinds of books I liked reading. I gave my ratings of them, and why I gave the ratings. And then the fact that like so many people decided to like pick a fight with me off of me giving like Name of the Wind 3.5 stars was remarkable. It was a very good filter for which ones to not go out with. There's a few folks who are also like, you're very well read and you seem a little bit too smart for us, but we just want to give it a shot. I'm like, that's honest. we're not going out, but that's honest. I appreciate that honesty.
You know
You'll
what
get a
I did for
response.
what I did for years was I'd only put photos, because it turns out men don't even notice when you don't fill. Sorry, that's a generalized gender statement. Many men don't seem to realize that you haven't filled out the profile. So I go out on dates and then I joke about how I don't even fill out the profile, and none of them have noticed a single one.
You got to
so
just put
weird,
the
like,
book review.
Yeah, but it's
Atlas
weird because they would
Shrugged.
ask questions like about information that was already on your profile. I'm like, wow,
It
you're
was
not
all there for
even
you.
30
Yeah.
seconds.
See, this is the
You don't-
big data that matters. If we want to talk big data, those dating apps have a lot of, big data. Obviously, there's been books written about it and stuff, but it's like constantly being resourced, and they have such amazing algorithms that, let me see if I can say this on air.
Okay, Cupid had one of the best data blogs I had read for years.
Yeah, interesting.
I
I'll have
remember
to check it
reading
out.
that. I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say something about how good the algorithms are, but I don't want to. I know some people are watching, so I won't say that. But basically,
Well,
they're very
also-
good. They're very good at matching up people who have the same interests. I'll say that. And the viewers who are involved know what I'm referring to. I'll put it in the blog with their permission.
The thing here is, like, you're the product when you use these, right? Like, or whatever. I mean, you can pay for them and pay your upsells or whatever, but like, there's an incentive to keep you on the platform, right? So do they really want you to find your perfect match or whatever, or your good enough match? No, because then you'll delete the app.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought you were going somewhere different with the product, as in how do you sell yourself?
Oh no, you are
right.
Yeah, well, they're probably just all selling your data to hedge funds anyways, because that's how that's what everybody does nowadays.
Private
I could go in
equity,
a whole
baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, just sell all your alt data to hedge funds about swipe rights and lefts and whatever.
So we could talk more about dating data. That'll be another show. We could talk, I think the three of you could talk probably for hours about tooling, but I want to make sure we talk about this initiative that Mikiko and Santona are launching. I don't know how soon or you tell us what it is, because that's kind of why we brought you on together.
Yeah, it's a great segue too, is you are the product, not just on dating profiles, but also like on when you're on the job hunt, right? Your resume, your LinkedIn, everything that is public facing about you is trying to sell to some extent your skills and what value you can add. So going back to where we started, right, is data people take themselves too seriously. It's hard to sometimes see the impact of your work, but it's so important to be able to point to, this stuff that you've done that have impacted the bottom line. I think there's a lot of like bad advice out there, as well as a lot of confusion around what to do and what not to do. I mean, maybe it's just there's a lot of advice out there, so there's a lot of noise naturally around like how do you make yourself more appealing to employers, and all this sort of stuff. So we sort of. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, just to dig in a little bit. I think from you personally, this is coming from your experience where you were coming out of academia with like a PhD in particle physics, and that making that transition into industry and sort of teaching people how to do that as part of what you want to do.
That's part of it. I think having different experiences reflected is super important. And yeah, Mickey and I have sort of different paths that we took, and we're gonna talk to folks that have different journeys. And like one thing I've always been super transparent about is sharing my journey. I'll like talk to high school folks sometimes or college folks and just like talk about how I got to where I am and what's worked and what hasn't worked. And one of my core messages is that it's easy. The thing that we do is actually quite easy. And I know I'm going to get some backlash around saying that. But the point is that I feel like folks should be empowered, especially folks like that have my skin color and that have my gender identity, et cetera, should feel empowered to, if this is what you want to do, if you want to work with data, if you want to be a scientist, if you want to be a physicist, what have you, it's so important to feel empowered and then advocate for yourself to get yourself there. So yeah, definitely want to have different journeys represented, different kinds of backgrounds and experiences, and just like talk about what works and what doesn't work, and what's bad advice, and like what's the point of spending 6 months doing like Kaggle competitions, right? I mean, I don't have anything else against Kaggle in particular, but because just the more stories we have represented, the more holistic picture we'll have of how to progress in your career.
Love it. And how did you get involved, or how did this become something sort of a joint thing you want to do together with I'll let you answer that, Mickey.
Yeah, I mean, so we've known each other for a few years, and actually I had interviewed Santona for that role that was a hot fire of a mess, and I'm really glad she did not take that role, that every female left eventually within 3 to 4 months. So yeah, so we've known each other for a while, and I think so, at least for this particular endeavor, we had connected at Data Talks in Austin, which is a fantastic conference. I had not known about it until like Joe had posted like 1 or 2 weeks before that, and I was like, oh, I really wish I could go. And then I ended up going, and it was great.
So not to be confused with Data Council. So this is Data Talks.
Data Day Texas, actually.
Data Day Texas, sorry.
Data Day Texas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Organized by Lynn and a few others. So I think the part that was really interesting was that there was a lot of women in data there, which was great. And I think Joe and Matt had hosted this like kind of, I don't want to say an open mic session. They had been scheduled to do a talk, but they had turned it more into like an extension of their Monday show, their Monday talk show.
Monday morning chat.
Yeah, Monday morning chat, and they had opened up to the audience, and I think there was a certain feeling of, it feels like, and I have this argument too. So my dad he's a white dude, grew up in Wyoming, born and raised in Wyoming, Ohio, from a WASP family, Midwest American, all that good stuff, like heterosexual, mostly kind of church going, it's fallen off the last 15 years. But like he and I, we have a lot of different like debates and discussions because, I'm half Asian and female. I wave the rainbow flag quite proudly. I have different beliefs and values, especially with how I approach my career, like very big generational difference. He's also like close to his 80s and I'm like in my 30s. So a lot of gaps, and it feels like a lot of our arguments and debates are in some ways reflected in like the different generations of data and data practitioners. And like I just kind of heard that coming out in some ways, like in the session with Joe and Matt. And so Shane and I, we were talking, we were like, maybe this is a thing like that needs to be addressed, especially for folks who are coming into data science. Because so Vicky Boykis, she had this one blog post about how a lot of work as a MLOps engineer or ML engineer is like vendor management. It's like vendor ops. It's not MLOps. It's not data ops. It's vendor ops. And I think for new folks that are coming in, it's very confusing. There's definitely a lot of changes going on in the data science machine learning space, but also some things still remain the same. And so even though Shant and I were like, we came to similar career paths from very, very different directions, because we have tried different things between us, hopefully we can represent kind of like a menu of choices for people and can help them guide them to the most delicious, first course, second course, dessert, wine pairing with your dessert or tea or coffee, whatever.
Yeah. To add on to that a little bit. It really felt like during that town hall that Joe and Matt were hosting, the difference that Mikiko was sort of delineating between like maybe an older generation and a younger generation was kind of came out as pretty stark. There's this idea that academia doesn't prepare you for industry. You don't want to hire folks out of and even like PhDs. Like there are some some companies that like have new grad hires that treat PhDs and postdocs the same as undergraduates, like completely discounting those years of experience and stuff. So this idea that academia doesn't prepare you. Well, okay, what does? 6 months at a job where you're exposed to production engineering and you have a good mentor. That's all you need, right? And why are we not willing to put in those 6 months in training someone? We only want to hire them once they've been trained somewhere else, and now we're okay with doubling their salary and bringing them on. So this sort of thing, right? And then so part of the conversation, I think, absolutely needs to be, well, what can we do better as academics? What can we do better? Like, how do I prepare my students, for example? I'm not teaching right now, but to follow to make that transition, but also as like industry folks, like I love hiring interns. I love working with interns, and like getting that, like, it's almost like a crash course on things that can go wrong and things that you get to play with and stuff. So yeah, what can we do as companies, as hiring managers, and somewhere in there also, what can we do as individuals to like tell our story better? What are the transferable skills? Again, like the different parts of the menu thing, right? Like, what do I bring? I bring so many different things from the different roles that I've had, and that would not, each of those contribute significantly to who I am today. So just conversations around all of that.
And most of those different parts of the menu are really only available to people who, like, maybe their dad or their brother or their uncle or their, frat bro brother or whatever, introduce them to. So bringing a fresh perspective to that, informing people. I love it. People can find both of you on LinkedIn, follow you there, and then we'll see kind of the latest on the initiative that you both bring. We're almost at the top of the hour, so we will wrap it in a minute here. Thank you both so much, Santona and Mickey. Lauren, if you guys want to stay on, Lauren's going to mention the Tech Bro of the Week real quick.
The Tech
Shout out to dude.
The Tech Bro of the Week is Peter Thiel, who's one of the Mount Rushmore of investors, and the reason why is because he raised a big
and one I generally do not like, for the record, but yeah.
He's the bro of the week because he's giving back half of the venture capital fund that he raised recently, 1.8 billion. It's going down to 900 million. Maybe there aren't that many new companies to invest in. Maybe they don't need all this money. Maybe the whole venture model's dead. So everyone's out here calling things dead. Yeah, he's giving. He's a big name in the industry, like him or not. He's can move mountains, and people listen to what he does, and he can set a trend. And he gave back about $1 billion of his almost $2 billion fund. And is he playing 5D chess or is he playing checkers? And are most of these VCs playing 5D chess or are they playing checkers? I don't know, but it's interesting. And it's
maybe he's just reading your blog. You are one of America's top writers on venture capital, after all. So he could be taking his moves based off of that.
I just shit on VCs, and I'm now one of Medium's top voices in venture capital because I tag everything as venture capital. So that's how funny this industry is.
Well, I mean, so many of the tech and the data jobs have been swimming in the VC money. So paying attention to what's happening, and whether Peter's move was like a headline making thing, because maybe he's shifting that money into another fund. I don't know.
He is
TBD, but he knows how to get attention anyway. So Peter Thiel, Tech Bro of the Week, and honorary Tech Bros of the Week. We'll have to do another show together sometime, or any other fun events you guys want to do and throw around 4-letter words. Santona and Mickey, this was fantastic. Thanks for giving us a full hour, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for having us.
Take care, y'all.
Bye.